You just released a new book. Why was this the moment that you chose to tell this story?
Well, it's a story I've been wanting to tell for a very long time. There's a long version of the story and a shorter version, but I remember thinking back when I was like a teenager that once I realized that the life I was leading wasn't exactly what you'd call a conventional one, that it might make a good story one day. But at that time, I wasn't really ready to tell the story. So I think one of the impetuses of wanting to do this was after my father died, and then the story being told to the public changed a lot. And when that story changed, it was really upsetting to me and my family and all the people around my father. So I thought, well, somehow or other, I've got to get the true story out there. And that's when I started working on this. The first formal attempt of it was about 12 years ago when I was invited to join a writing class. And I went in there saying, oh, I want to write a biography about my father. And the woman leading the class said, oh, no, 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 you have to write a memoir. And I thought, oh my God, I don't want to write a memoir. I don't want the focus to be on me. But that's what they wanted me to do. So I wrote one, and I hated it. But it eventually served as kind of a map to telling the story about my father. And so that's why it's called Dad, Barbie, and Me, an insider biography, because it is a biography, but it's a biography being told, obviously, by an insider, me. So it's not a memoir. It's my father's story as I'm telling it.
Who was leading that initial change of the narrative after your father passed away?
Well, mainly Ruth Handler, the co-founder of Mattel, who, after my father died, decided she was going to rewrite Mattel's history, most notably about the invention of Barbie, and just sort of write him out of the story.
Who else?
Well, Mattel in general. At that point, Ruth and Elliot Handler were no longer at Mattel because there had been some problems and they had been removed from Mattel's board and forced to sell all their shares of stock and basically lost the company that they had originally started. But since that time, Mattel has sort of kept beating the drum of the Ruth-centered story about Barbie. And the thing is that I'm not trying to dismiss Ruth from the story. Ruth was an incredible marketer. And initially, when she and my father were working together, not just on Barbie, but on all of the toys that my father's design group at Mattel invented, including Chatty Cathy, all the other talking toys, Hot Wheels, they were getting along fine. Ruth was the marketing machine. My father was the inventor and the one who got the toys made and rocketed Mattel to the success it still enjoys.
It doesn't really make sense. I guess maybe there's no social media, but there's all these articles that had been written already about your dad. So I don't understand how people changed the narrative. How come nobody went to one of those old writers and said, hey, remember when you wrote about my dad? Like, they're changing the story. How come nobody brought that up?
You mean, how come I didn't bring it up?
Anybody?
Well, the first person to really do it publicly was Jerry Oppenheimer, the author of...
That was decades and decades and decades later.
It was in 2009. So yeah, it was almost 20 years later. I don't know. I didn't feel, shall we say, empowered to do anything about it. I felt mostly crushed. And I don't know who else would have been championing the correct story other than me. I mean, it I don't know. I don't know exactly how it happened, but the problem is that Ruth kept crowing about it, and then people wrote about what she said, and if you say something enough times, eventually people start to believe it. So it's been a real uphill battle to try to go back and tell the real story and tell it not anecdotally, but with facts.
Yeah, there's a quote that if you tell a lie big enough and long enough, people will start to believe it.
Oh my goodness. Well, that was definitely the story. I mean, that's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that when you're so exhausted for so long. You're like, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to battle again for forever. And Mattel has resources, media resources, financial resources, PR resources, and it can be difficult to go against that. So, and then Jerry's story came out in 2009. When did you read Jerry's version?
I read it when it came out, which was in 2009. It's called Toy Monster, The Big Bad World Mattel. And it's just the first part of the book that deals with that period when my father was there. But he did a tremendous amount of research and basically uncovered all of the work that my dad had actually done, which of course is also memorialized by all of his patents. He has over 1,000 worldwide patents for all of the designs that he created. And so that was the first glimmer of hope I think I had, that somebody was willing to go out on a limb and go up against Mattel and say, look, the story you guys are telling isn't the true story. You've left out a big part of it. And that continues to this day.
Yeah. How did Jerry come about this?
Well, I don't know what the genesis of the idea was, to be quite honest. And that's a really good question. And I hadn't thought about that before. I guess I'll ask him. But once he started digging into things with extensive interviews and document requests and all the other things that one does when they do a deep dive, I think the more he uncovered, the more he saw what the real story was. And it isn't just about Mattel not properly crediting my father. It's about all the other shenanigans that were going on at Mattel that almost cratered the entire company. And what happened was that they started shortchanging my father's royalty checks and then eventually stopped paying him at all. And that forced him to sue Mattel for $25 million that they owed him. And their strategy was, because they didn't have a defense, because they knew they owed him the money, was to basically try to drag out the lawsuit for as long as possible in order to bankrupt my father, because they were spending $1 million a year on attorney's fees to keep this lawsuit churning along. And he was just one guy, albeit somebody with a lot of money. But when you're going up against a powerhouse like Mattel, and it's just you, it's very easy to drain your resources. And that's what happened. And eventually it caused him to lose his most favorite toy of all times, which was our estate in Bel Air, which he had turned into a castle and funland, and with all sorts of toys that a big kid could enjoy, a tree house, a fire engine, just all sorts of fun stuff, parties and events. And he couldn't afford to keep that going, and he needed to sell it in order to keep the lawsuit going. And so that was a huge disappointment, but he didn't allow it to crush him, because he knew that he had to keep going, that this wasn't right what Mattel was doing. So he persevered and eventually won in a settlement.
What was that process of getting the book finished like? And back in 2014, when you said that this started, when did it morph from memoir into the story about your dad?
It really started when you suggested that I start a podcast, which at first I was like, oh my God, something else to learn how to do. But you were right. You were absolutely right about it. And so I just started interviewing people that had known my father about their experiences working with him, or people who knew him socially, family members, just trying to put together a story anecdotally about what my father's life was like. And from there, I got quite a bit of press because people listened to the podcast and wanted to know more about it. And then a couple of years ago, a British production company did a documentary called Barbie Uncovered, A Dream House Divided. And they interviewed me and Annie Constantinesco and Susan Thacker and a bunch of other people who had been around. And I have to say, it's the first iteration of beyond Jerry's book of starting to tell the real story. I mean, there's still some parts of it I don't 100% agree with, but it definitely started moving the ball in the right direction. So I'm grateful for that. And that all came about because of my podcast. So that is what got the ball rolling. And
What
then
year was that?
I think we filmed it in 2023 and it came out in 2024.
Yeah.
And
What
then,
was the
yeah,
process like right in?
well, I would say it started in earnest when I was able to acquire a bunch of archival materials about my dad that my sister had been holding for many years. And she decided to send them all to me. In fact, you were there when I received some of those boxes and did some great unboxing videos. I mean, it was remarkable discovering, first of all, a lot of photos that I hadn't seen before, but also all sorts of fascinating documents, including letters going back and forth between my parents before they were married, and then after my father started working at Mattel, during the periods he spent in Japan when they were just getting Barbie going, and he was over there working closely with the manufacturing company to realize Barbie. And so all of the discussions that were going on are memorialized in these letters. And also very interesting letters from when my father was working at Raytheon in Massachusetts, when he was overseeing, I think there were about 600 or 700 people working on the development of the Hawk and Sparrow low-altitude defense missiles, and how that ended up with him going to Mattel, which is kind of an interesting story. Actually, it's a very interesting story. So finding all of these letters allowed me to put together all of the things that I knew about only sort of tangentially and see in real time exactly what was going on. And that was absolutely fascinating.
Did anything you found in those letters or anything like what changed the understanding that you had of this story that you had been telling?
Well, I think, well, it provided a lot more context for everything that was going on. But one of the things I found particularly interesting was that the story about how my father came to Mattel was always told as my father had been working on a crystal radio for children. And this was something he had started when he was a child And then when we were living in Cambridge and he was working for Raytheon, it was one of those kitchen table projects that he worked on at night. And so the story that's been told was that he went to Toy Fair in New York City in 1955 to look for a buyer for that. And that's where he met Ruth and Elliot Handler, who were immediately taken not just by his design, but by his enthusiasm and brilliance. And that isn't exactly how it happened. So what actually happened was while my father was working at Raytheon, he met a guy named Albert Weinstein, who had connections with the military industrial complex, but also had connections to toy companies. And he decided that he wanted to try to market my father's crystal radio design to toy makers. And so basically what it came down to, he found two companies that were interested, and Mattel was interested, and they were so interested that they insisted on meeting my father. So he flew out to Los Angeles and met with them. And this was in 1955. And he managed to dazzle them and make a deal with them all in one meeting. And the next thing you know, we were packing up the car in Cambridge and moving to LA.
I want to hear about the book, what it was like writing the book. What did the actual writing process look like in practical terms?
I would say the outline for it started when I wrote the memoir back in 2014. But I hated it because the focus was on me. But as far as the timeline goes, it was a good starting point. Then when I got all of the materials from my sister, and I had all of the specific letters and documents and photographs and everything else, then I was able to start weaving all of that in. And then plus that, I had all of the podcast interviews that I had done with people. So those were firsthand accounts that I could cite. And so it was taking a combination of those ingredients and trying to make a full meal out of it. It was tough. It was tough. I'd never done anything like that before. And I had to choose what's important, what's not important, when to zoom in, when to zoom out. Because it wasn't just about Mattel, it was about his personal life as well, including his 5 marriages, first to my mother, Barbie, and then secondly to Zsa Zsa Gabor, which was wild. And I was about 21 years old when he married her. So she became my first stepmother, and she would sign things to me, love from Mama number 2. And then he went on to marry 3 other women after that. And so there was this time working at Mattel, there was this time suing Mattel and moving his design group from Mattel to the estate, to the castle, to continue working on designs for other kinds of toys and products. There was his whole social life, the parties. There were a lot of celebrities. There was always something going on. There was nothing like it going on in LA back in those days. Celebrities loved to come because it was really the best show in town.
How many hours did you spend on this?
Oh my gosh, I didn't track it. It's hard. When I was in the home stretch, because I had a deadline to complete it, that's when I spent the most continuous hours. And I spent them mostly at night. I found that working at night after dark was less distracting than trying to work on it during the day. But it was really, really hard. I mean, it almost broke my brain a few times trying to string things together in a cohesive and interesting way.
How much rewriting did it take to get it into its final form?
Well, writing is mostly rewriting, and there was a tremendous amount of that. And then once I would rewrite one section, I'd realize, oh no, that's going to affect the stuff that went before it, went after it. So it's this constant going back and forth, trying to rearrange things so that they make sense. And yeah, just trying to make something that's accurate, compelling, interesting, funny at times, tragic at other times. Trying to write something that tells the story accurately and is something that people will want to read. The big thing now is the promotion, that the work doesn't end when the book is done. I mean, when I finished writing it, the next part was the publishing part, which of course I had never done before. And while I had considered and spoken with some traditional publishers, I ultimately ended up publishing it myself for a variety of reasons. And I'm really glad that I made that decision. So then came the editing process, the laying out the book process, getting the book printed. In fact, just this weekend, I've been working with somebody to do the ebook version of that so that it's in a format to upload. This is all stuff I don't have the skills to do myself, so I've had to seek out other people. The editing of the physical book and the book design was done by my friend Dawn Denon here in Chatham at Watermark, and she has been just an incredible resource and support as I went through this process. She's been fantastic. And then the next part I'm doing after doing the ebook is an audible audio version of the book. And that's been quite vexing as I make the decision, am I going to voice this myself? I also am interested in having somebody else whom I haven't spoken to about this yet, but I'm hoping that she would do it if I decided to go in that direction. It's everything is more complicated than you think it's going to be. Even though there are so many tools out there right now to help you, it's easier than it's ever been. But there's still decisions that have to be made that are critical to ending up with an end product that's what I want it to be.
And how did you find Dawn?
I'm really good friends with her mother, who lives here in Chatham and who serves on some of the boards that I'm on. And I had met Dawn through her. And then one day we realized that she had done books before and that I needed somebody to do it. And she happened to be here in town, which was just extraordinary. Not just in town, but living down the street from me. So I figured it was meant to be, and I'm so grateful that I had somebody that I could work with and to kind of hold my hand through this whole thing, because if I had been working with a remote editor someplace else, it would have been a completely different experience. So, in fact, we're meeting this afternoon just to go over some of the stuff that's being uploaded for the Kindle version of the book, and that's been a fabulous experience working with her on all of that. And so, but then the other part of this is the promotional thing, which really started years ago, posting on social media in general about the story, then posting on social media about the podcast, the movie. And so I've been doing a lot more reels and things like that because I've learned that they create more engagement than just static posts. And again, a lot of this is kind of breaking my brain and requires so much effort on my part. I feel kind of clumsy as I go about it, trying to create something that people want to watch. But we're coming into the home stretch right now. The book is coming out on June 1st, so I'm doubling down because it's going to be available on Amazon, but I will also be doing book signings And then we're also going to be offering signed copies of the book on my website, so that if you want a slightly better version than the one you can get on Amazon and also get my autograph on it, you can order it from my website. And so I think that'll be a good thing. I have a few author events coming up soon. I'm really excited about that. I'm going to be in Durham, North Carolina at Bradley Justice Yarborough's BradleyCon Barbie event extravaganza, where we pre-sold a lot of books, which was really exciting. And then in July, I'm going to be a speaker at BarbieCon, the International Barbie Convention in Austin, Texas. I have signings here coming up in Chatham and Los Angeles, and a lot of dates to be determined. So it's going to be fun. I like going out and doing that and meeting people and talking to them about the book.
Was there a point where you felt stuck on anything? Or
Yeah.
was it just a mountain of work that you just had to chip away at?
Well, it was a combination of things. I mean, first of all, I can't remember which author, and it may have been many, who have said, you just have to get your butt in a chair and start writing. And I kind of remember that when I was studying journalism at UCLA, because we had to write every day. And sometimes I'd sit down at my typewriter and just type, I don't want to do this. I'm sick and tired. And somehow the act of just typing eventually broke through and allowed me to start writing about whatever it was I should have been writing about. And a lot of times, that's why I was saying it was difficult sometimes to write during the day. There were a lot of distractions. And at night, when it's dark and quiet, I did a lot of writing then. But yeah, it was hard. Sometimes I found that I'd have to skip over a part and work on something else because I was having so much trouble with one particular thing. And then going back to just sitting down and doing it, author Anne Lamott talks about writing a shitty first draft. So you just sit down and you write down, okay, yeah, and then we went to the beach, and then we went there, and you just get something down. And then after you've written that, then you go back and you revise it. Because pretty much the first you write about anything is pretty shitty. But you have to start somewhere. It's kind of like a sculptor when you have this big rock in front of you, a big piece of marble, and you chip away at it, and you can't really see what it is, but you've got to keep chipping away, smoothing it, and then eventually it takes a form that starts to look like something, and then you just keep refining.
What did you learn about yourself as a writer? What did you learn about the writing process? And does this make you want to write more books?
Yes, it does. It was incredibly hard, but ultimately extremely gratifying. First of all, to have something that's finished. I mean, if I were to do it again, would I change anything? Well, I might change a few things, but there will be other opportunities to do that. But what I learned is I enjoy telling stories. And that's really what writing is all about. And it can be very uncomfortable at times, very inconvenient at times. But when you get to something that has actually started to take the shape of something that you imagined, it's very exciting. And yes, and I do have some other things that I'm going to be working on, including a whole series of books that has absolutely nothing to do with my father. So I'm pretty excited about that. But it's good to have the next projects queued up and ready to challenge me.
What do you want readers to take from this? They're going to follow your group on Facebook. They're going to meet you up at BarbieCon, and then they're going to take the book. They're going to read it. What are they going to take from it?
I hope a better understanding of who my dad was and what a fascinating character he was on a lot of different levels. He was incredibly beautiful and he was incredibly brilliant, but also very troubled. And he started out as a dyslexic child who couldn't read, and yet he managed to figure out workarounds that led him to Yale University and to Raytheon. He overcame a lot of obstacles in his life. And I think that that's a very good story in itself. There are just so many different facets to him and his life. I think he's just a really interesting and compelling character. So I hope people will be inspired and entertained at the same time.
Do you think Mattel will read this?
I have no idea. I have no idea if they will read it or not. It's kind of a shame that they haven't embraced my father, because I think it could be a very positive thing for their story. And it would be nice if we could cooperate. And I think it would be good for everybody.
How do you think they would feel about it if they read it? Or do you think that people there might not even know the history?
Oh, I think a lot of people don't know the history. I mean, it goes back so far to way before any of the people who are at Mattel were even born. So all they know is like the formal corporate history, which is not the correct version. And I'd like them to know the correct version. And I think we might have an interesting collaboration, because my father really loved Mattel. And Mattel derives most of their income from Barbie and Hot Wheels, the two toys he invented. And here we are decades and decades later. I mean, that really says something. So why wouldn't you want to embrace that?
What would embracing that potentially open them up to, legally or PR wise or whatever?
Well, I don't know. I can't speak for them, but you would think that it would be good for them to tell the real story about how these toys came to be, because it's interesting. It's part of their story. It enriches their story.
Is there a smoking gun in your book that proves your fundamental argument about your dad and Mattel's relationship in Barbie?
Well, I wouldn't call it a smoking gun. I'd actually call it something that's right there in their faces. And that is the patents. If you go through the patents for all of these toys, especially the Barbie drawing patent that you see all over the place, it has my father's name, John W. Ryan, inventor, on it. There's no other inventor connected with Barbie. It just says John W. Ryan, inventor.
And is that what Mattel is questioning?
I don't know if they're questioning it. The idea is that at some point, a few years back, they brought Ruth Handler back into the fold and celebrated her as this woman CEO, a visionary, and all of that stuff. Meanwhile, she had engaged in a lot of criminal activities that almost cratered Mattel. There were SEC investigations and everything else. And why not give some credit to the person who is still responsible for bringing in a significant portion of your income every year, and who is also a very interesting person?
We're just trying to figure out what is their claim that you're disputing, and then what is that sort of smoking gun that proves you're right?
Their claim is more of a non-claim. I mean, basically, they say that Ruth was responsible for everything and they don't give any credit at all to my father. I think that when you read about all of the details, and I'm just talking about Barbie to begin with, all of the details of the production of the first and all the subsequent Barbie dolls, including things like the chemistry involved in the plastics to create a doll that would do the things that Barbie needed to do. And then later on, different iterations of Barbie with the twist and turn waist and the bendable knees that allowed children to play differently with Barbie. Because it isn't just about what Barbie looks like. It's about how you play with her, how you change her clothes. I mean, Charlotte Johnson, who was Barbie's original fashion designer, designed the most extraordinary clothes. Anybody who's seen any of those early clothes would just be amazed. It was like couture for a Barbie-sized doll, and it was just incredible. And the clothes were a huge part of playing with Barbie. But it's also playing, how do you play with Barbie? What does Barbie do? How does she move? How does she act? Well, my father, as an engineer, was the one who created the ability to play with Barbie in all of these different ways. The term, let's go play Barbies, that's what kids did. And so, it's just sort of undeniable once you dig in a little bit. And also because of all the patents. They don't just issue patents to anybody.
Anything else you want to talk about?
It's the strategy of getting the book out. I don't have a publicist. I'm doing this all on my own. So luckily we have social media now, but I just want to do the best job I can at getting the word out there. So every day I'm learning a little bit more about what to do on that note. I'm hoping that people will enjoy the book and embrace it. And I know my dad would be really, really happy to see all of this happening.
And so when does the book come out and where can people get it?
Okay, the book comes out will be released on Amazon on June 1st, 2026, and they'll be able to buy it there. And you can also go to my website and buy the book directly there, and you will get an autographed copy of the book.
What's the name of the podcast? What's the name of your Instagram handle? And what is the name of the website?
The website is AnnRyanOfficial.com, and that has links to the podcast, to the book, and all sorts of other information. The podcast is called Dream House, The Real Story of Jack Ryan. It's available on all the podcasting sites.
What's your Instagram handle?
Ann P. Ryan. And it's the same on Facebook, and I'm also on TikTok. Not sure what the handle is, but my website has links to all of my social media. Oh, and I'm starting a YouTube channel, and I'm going to put up all the reels that I had on social media as, what do you call them, shorts up there. And then I'm going to, I think from this point on, all of my podcasts in the past have been audio only, but I think I'm going to start doing them as a video like this one that we're doing today. People seem to like the visuals, so.
Let's do another podcast once the book is released, and we can get a little bit more insight into what the actual book publicity is like and what it's actually like to do a book launch. I'd be curious to hear about what that's like maybe sometime in the fall.
Well, I can also talk about Bradley Con and Barbie Con, and the book's being released officially at Bradley Con. And then I will also be speaking and signing books at Barbie Con, which is a big, really big event. But I appreciate you doing switching roles here and you interviewing me for my own podcast.